Hi everyone, Allison here from Fathom 5 Tarot, and this is going to be a bit of a funny mishmash of a video. Um, I've got lots of things to say, but not a ton of props, and I don't want it to be boring. So I'm going to talk about my recent trip to Salem, Massachusetts, and a couple of book recommendations that came out of that trip. Uh, so yeah, it's I really was energized by it, and I really wanted to talk about it because it's a fascinating place, and so much more fascinating than I thought. Um, so anyway, I'm just gonna get into it because otherwise it's gonna be too hard. I'm just gonna adjust my chair, which I should have done before. Okay. So I went to Salem. First of all, it was not really a planned trip in that I knew I had to go to New Hampshire for work and for a conference, and I had booked everything. And then just the schedule of the conference changed last minute. Just a presenters, like their schedule changed, and so they were like, "Oh, I'll still come. Like you can come and hang out and familiarize yourself with the town or something." But I was like, "Oh well, like what else could I do? I'm going to be in that town for a while." So I thought, well, I'm flying into Boston. Maybe I'll just hoof it on up to Salem and then take a train up to New Hampshire. Everything's so tiny and close in those states. When you're from Ontario, which is a gigantic province that could like eat Texas twice, everything feels really close when you're going from state to state, especially in New England. So I did that, and so I spent one day in Salem. So this isn't a comprehensive like I wish, and I was desperate to have more time. I had a great conference, mind you. That was awesome too. But I was super bummed that I didn't have more time. And immediately I was like, how do I get back there? Because there's more I want to discover and explore. And I found out the way I want to do that through this great tour company, which I'm going to talk about. So anyway, and I go for my really afternoon by the time I fly into Boston and then get my way up to Salem. And so the reason I really wanted to go, well, I'm interested in a number of things, but primarily I'm going to be teaching The Crucible this year by Arthur Miller, and I've read it many times, and I've taught it before. But I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I had like actual photos that I had taken and could speak to locations that were important or things, and just have that experience, enriching experience. So I really wanted something specific out of the trip. I had two key interests. One was to enhance my knowledge of the actual Salem witch trials, because I know Arthur Miller obviously was using the trials as an allegory for McCarthyism in his play, and he did tons of research, but also made specific dramatic changes to the structure of the play in order to make the story hold together cohesively. And some of them, and he made some mistakes too. He was wrong about some stuff, just the way that historians are always discovering new things. So it's a brilliant play, and no shade on Arthur Miller, but I learned actually that my knowledge of the trials was not up to date, that I was taking too much from Miller's interpretation of events. And so I'm going to talk about that because I've got a book recommendation if you're interested in that period of history. But I'm also super interested in what Salem has become and what that like just sort of says about the human condition. And I don't want to offend anybody. I have really complex feelings about Salem because to go there is to experience a form of dark tourism, right? To go to this place where people were wrongfully executed and punished, not just executed. Some people died languishing in these horrible, horrible prison conditions, waiting for their trial. And the scars of it are there for sure. So it's this very dark thing, but it's also become this really fun place, right? In October. Now, I will never go there in October because I don't like being jostled. I don't love big crowds and whatever. I'm not doing it. But it's a huge party. And people love it, and people descend on that place every year. And that Salem is like, they're not thinking about the witch trials. They're not thinking about these executions of innocent people, and it all has to coexist. And I'm super interested in how it became that way. So I went to Salem looking for insight into these two things, the real history and also just this incredible what is it? It's like a development and like a shape shifting of a place that initially for hundreds of years tried to hide this terrible, terrible thing that happened, and now survives almost entirely on that terrible thing that happened. Not entirely, for sure. There's a fantastic art gallery there that I saw but didn't get a chance to go in because I was so singularly focused on the historical aspect. They have shipping and maritime. It's a beautiful little town. People go there, I'm sure, for all kinds of different reasons, but a lot of people that go there for the witches. So I had thought I was just going to go for the afternoon and like just sort of walk my way around. I knew it wasn't big. I knew it's like a super walkable city, and just sort of figure it out and take some photos. And I was like, everything I do here is a bonus because I didn't know I was coming, and everything will help me for my class anyway. But I took the ferry up from Boston, and on the ferry they give you, well, I should have brought it, I think I still have it, but like a brochure of everything you can do in Salem, from crazy sort of really sensationalistic tours and haunts and all this stuff to totally non-witch related things and blah, 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 blah. So I really wanted to, if I was going to take a tour, which I didn't think I was, but I wanted to take the right tour because I had these two really specific interests. I was like, I want to talk about the history and then the evolution of the city and what it's become. And then I found this ad in this brochure for, and I'll put a link below. I haven't figured out how to do the cards on the top yet. One day. I just learned to edit in my last video, 2 videos ago. So just learning. But it's called Now Age Travel, right? As in sort of like a play on New Age, but Now Age Travel. And they do Salem tours, and they are fantastic. I have no affiliation with this company. Doesn't make any difference to me whether or not people go, except that I think they should because it's just so fascinating. So on that day, there was a 2-hour walking tour scheduled. And again, I was there for one afternoon, so I'm frantically calling their office. I want to get in. I want to get into this tour. They max it out at 12. So I was like, oh God, what are the odds on a Saturday I'm going to be able to, to figure it out? And nobody's answering. I'm like, oh, of course, Saturday. I don't even know where this office is. And then I see that all of the tours start from the store called Housewitch, Hauswitch. And I was like, whatever. As soon as I get in, I'll throw my bags at the Airbnb and I'll book it to this store. I should get there around 1:30 in the afternoon, and then maybe if I just hang around, I'll get to go on this tour, or maybe they'll just let me on. So that's what I did, and it was a great thing to do because I got on the tour and there was only 2 other people signed up. So we got to have this super intimate tour, and again, it was really specific. So it was the witch trials of 1692 and all the way up to what Salem is today, and discussing this like really crunchy, difficult, uneasy marrying of witch trials as history and witch trials as tourism. And I saw sort of the gamut. And so this amazing woman, Melissa, I think she runs almost all the tours. I think there's some specific ones. If you go to her website, there's ones about herbalism, because she is a practicing witch. And so she comes at it from that sort of historical aspect, but also her own personal aspect. It's super fascinating. So I don't think maybe quite all. There are some maybe specialized ones that aren't led by her, but she is like a library of historical information and everything you might want to do and understand about these witch trials. And then she takes you around to locations. She was only offering the 2-hour tour. I would have done the 4-hour tour. I would have done an all-day tour with this woman because it was so fascinating. And we stopped at, again, typical tour spots, but like for example, there's the famous Bewitched statue, and she talked about the whole history of how Bewitched ended up filming there to begin with, which was kind of a fluke, and how that was super controversial. And then the statue itself is really controversial. And that the ground that the statue is on is actually directly linked to the witch trials and is the burying place of one of the judges. But instead there's this like kitschy witch on top of it. And it's all like that. There's really interesting layers of history and harm, and yet also joy later on, because, there are practicing witches in Salem, and they go there because they feel It's a place where they will be free and welcomed, and that progress is something to celebrate. I happened to be there on Pride Day, the North Shore Pride Day. So I'm not sure if other little towns along the North Shore all go to Salem for Pride, or if there's a bunch of different ones, I don't know. But it was like everybody, they was all like lovey and kind and fun. All the churches I saw had rainbow flags flying, all of them. Like, if this town has learned from persecution, it's don't do it. So that was incredibly moving to just see. And there's a lot of churches in Salem, of different denominations, different Christian denominations, but just rainbow flag, rainbow poster. One of them had a bunch of like rainbow, just freestanding doors, but they were all painted rainbow colors. It was just, oh my God, it was so great. And so, yeah, she took us around and told us, and I'm not going to go through the tour because it's too much. This would be like 6 hours long. But it was so riveting. And Salem is unique. I think if you're at all interested, it's worth a visit. People come from Europe. Thousands of people come from Europe every year to go to Salem. And there were way more witch trials in Europe than there were in Salem, right? Salem has become emblematic of something else because of this juice that's all been simmering in for years. And even within the town, people have to find ways to reconcile that. There are people in the town who don't agree with using the witch trials as any kind of tourism. And yet financially, it's kind of saved Salem, where it's had a number of industries fold, and the shipping industry has sort of all moved to Boston. And so it's just a fascination. From there, so I said, sorry, Now Age Travel. I'm going to put it below. Check her out because she is the bomb. Melissa is her name. And her partner runs the House Witch store. That's why you start from there, which is also a great store. You should go in. I have no affiliation. I get nothing out of this except for joy of passing on and great location. So then I became super interested, and I picked up this book from my local, sorry, it's a lot of glare, my local library, A Storm of Witchcraft by Emerson W. Baker. And this is a really comprehensive study from 2016, I think. 2014, actually, I think. So quite recent. But looking at all the factors that made Salem what it was, because it had to sort of be this powder keg of tensions and fears and the challenges and failings of the Puritan religion and the previous political situation, the recent war with Quebec, which I didn't even know about. It's just really fascinating. Evidence that, and there were all kinds of things I didn't realize. I knew the obvious that Arthur Miller had changed. Like, there's likely no sexual relationship between John Proctor and Abigail Williams. That was a theatrical device inserted into the play to give the play some sort of core conflict. And I didn't realize that Abigail and Betty Paris left the story quite early, actually, and that the rest of the girls, with the exception of one, were all sort of early 20s, 19 to 21 maybe. I didn't realize that actually the first act that really got Reverend Paris worked up was an act of counter magic. After Abigail and Betty started behaving strangely, one of the neighbor women, Mary Sibley, I think it was, Easty or Sibley, I think, baked a witch cake. And so the idea was, it's really gross, so just skip ahead if you're not into this. But I guess the folk magic thinking was, if you baked a cake with, I think it was just bread, but with the urine of the afflicted and then fed it to a family dog, the dog would lead you to the devil. And so like that was, and then Paris came home and of course flipped out, but she wasn't persecuted because she wasn't acting for the devil. She was trying to root out the devil. So even within this idea of what witchcraft was, there were these very specific layers, and it's really readable. I know it's thick and it looks daunting maybe to have all on this, but I really enjoyed it. And then there's a short chapter at the end. I would have liked more about how Salem became the way it did. It sort of reinforced what I learned on my tour. My tour was way more detailed, but the ramping up of tourism and whether to celebrate not celebrate, sorry, that's disgusting, but whether to memorialize and to acknowledge this terrible thing happened here, and we will put up a memorial, or to brush it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. And if you brush under the rug and you pretend it didn't happen, someone's going to eventually monetize it and capitalize on it and make their money from it. And that's what happened. While the town was still saying, no, 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 we didn't, and none of that happened here, Parker Brothers put out a game about the Salem witch trials. This jeweler put out, those little souvenir spoons. They think the first ones in America were this Salem jeweler, and they're apparently incredibly rare collector's items now. These little, I never got, why would you travel and just get a bunch of spoons? But there you go. But to get a Salem witch spoon from the 1890s is like incredibly valuable. So it's really interesting. And even today, like there's a Salem memorial, witch memorial, which was only put in 1992. So 300 years too late, basically. But there's one now, and it's beautiful and incredibly moving. Each of the executed has a stone slab with their name on it and the date that they died. And then all in the ground, that's a slab that sort of sticks out. It looks like a seat, which is problematic because I'll talk about that in a minute. But then in the ground all around are people's actual quotations from the trials. I am innocent to a witch, and these people pleading for their lives. It's incredibly beautiful and moving. But apparently if you go there in October and you go around 1 a.m. after the bars let out and everybody's all wasted, then they're just like sitting on these memorials eating fried dough because they didn't come for the witch trials. They came for the party. But there wouldn't be the party without the witch trials. Anyway, so fascinating. So again, this is my first recommendation. If you're interested in this point of history, A Storm of Witchcraft by Emerson W. Baker. I've really, really got a lot out of it. It's an excellent book. And the other book I want to talk about, I'm already gone on too long, I'm sorry, but it's great. I can't recommend it highly enough. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman. I didn't do a lot of shopping when I was there, but I wanted to purchase something from House Witch because I was so bowled over by this tour, and it's a beautiful store, and I like to support bricks and mortar stores. And this one seemed to also be sort of in the wheelhouse of what I was interested in learning. This, part cultural analysis, part memoir. This is an examination of the role the witch has played in society over decades, hundreds of years. And it's super interesting, stuff that I had really never thought of. She talks about the history of everything. It's worked into this book. L. Frank Baum and The Wicked Witch of the West, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Archie Comics, and new one. This is a very new book, so the Netflix Sabrina's in here too. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Practical Magic, Hocus Pocus, of course. But also things like the idea of childbirth and woman's role as mother. And in Christianity, the most important woman is a mother, but also a virgin. So the ideals for womanhood all wrapped up in one. Birth control, abortion, sort of teenage girls discovering their femininity and their power that way. Her own experiences as identifying as a witch. Bernie Sanders in here. The 70s political movement as witches. There's a whole chapter devoted to artists, visual artists who may not have identified themselves as witches, but who she feels sort of bring that kind of power to the world. It's a really fascinating book in a very conversational tone. I whipped through this one. I'll definitely read it again. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman. And she has a podcast, it says in the book, but I have not... Maybe it's called Waking the Witch. I should have looked this up. I'm sorry. Oh, she is a creator and host of the Witch Wave, as in podcast. So maybe you should check her out and check out this book for sure, because it is great. Okay, what a ramble, 20 minutes. So that was my trip to Salem. I'm going to link Now Age Travel and House Witch below. So you should, if you're going there, I think that's the tour to take. I know I didn't take any others. But I wasn't gonna go ghost hunting really, and I wasn't gonna. Um, I wanted a scholarly approach. Not that whatever you can think whatever you want about ghost hunting, but I wanted something very specific. And if this what I talked about today interests you, then that's what you get from Now Age Travel. So check out their website, super cool. Check out House Witch. Check out these books, Pam Grossman and Emerson Baker, and have a great day.